Ladies and gentlemen, get in here. Murder Church is on the air. What is going on? Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Let the folks know that you're hanging out here tonight. I think I did, actually. Let me make sure. Just shared this out on X, on Twitter. Please give that a share. Give this a like if you have not yet. That really helps us out. Coming in, episode 35, Phil Spector, Hollywood Murder Trial. Part 7 of Steve Renteria, criminalist who's been on the stand for quite some time now. We got an hour tonight with him, and we'll see how much further we get. We'll have to kind of fill it out. But yeah, appreciate everyone for being in here. I already see the chats filling up, and we're about to rock and roll, people. Coming at you right now.
Let's rock.
Boom! What is up, everybody? Murder Church. We're going to do a little singing here tonight, huh? We're going to sing for you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in here. Appreciate it. Yeah, Tuesday night, per the usual time frame, 8 to... we're going to fill it out. I don't know what the next part of this is going to be. And sometimes if it goes from an hour 8 to another hour, we'll see how that fills out. Again, we'll see how the night goes, but welcome in here regardless as of right now. I appreciate all the beautiful faces in chat. Who we got in here tonight? Dizzy coming through here. Drew coming through here. Lexi the Law Nerd coming through here. Thank you so much. And Lexi, always appreciate your shares. Thank you so much. You're absolutely amazing. Simi coming through here tonight. Jersey Jen coming through here. Carrie's in the house. Chris is in the house. Miss Dina's in the house here tonight. Afton is in the house here tonight. Wildside's in the house here tonight. That's what I'm talking about. Taryn Dusty's in the house. Cheney, Kelly, Bobelli. We got the whole crew in here deep here tonight. Already starting out hot, and that's what I like to see. Yeah, one thing that I am going to be switching up this week, make sure that, okay, this is working. According to the wheel, I'm going to pause the wheel for this week. I think probably from this Tuesday, I'll probably bring it back next Tuesday for that Murder Church. I think of what I'm going to do here, and again, I don't want to make this sound like I want you to be donating, you know, if you guys want to, that would be you guys are so generous and awesome. But what I'm going to do this week with any kind of donations that come through, whether that's through supers, people giving out memberships, whether that's the Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, the usual spiel, I'm going to be basically using that money for the international shipping that I do have coming up on a few shirts. I've got a couple going to Canada, a couple going to Ireland, and a couple going to Australia soon. So I think I'm going to try to just make that work. Again, that is not at all anything that you guys need or it's you have to do, but that's what I'm going to try to do with it. Those are kind of crazy to send out, but also, you know, I don't want to make that a thing to where I have to depend on that for them to go out either. But I like for them to get around the world. Sadly, I use bigcartel.com and through Printables where I get the shirts at. I could do international shipping even when you go through PubliclyBuzzed.com, but it's a whole nother step that I haven't taken yet because it's such a headache. So, but I do like to get these shirts out and about, so we'll see how this plays out. But everyone get the hell in here. And yeah, Bassett Page coming through here. Appreciate it. I'm debating about getting a brewski or not for tonight. I think I'm going to go up there because what I have to do is I have to go. Madeline coming through here also. That's what I'm talking about. Whole crew coming deep. If you've shared this, I appreciate it. I've got to go up and give Gypsy some food. I've been running. Honestly, we just got back from eating. Went and got a little bit of Taco Bell, even quick because we didn't have a lot of time tonight. Cassie got off late. So yeah, I'm going to go up there and give her a can of food, which reporting from Sunday, Gypsy is doing freaking awesome, man. She finally got moving again. I was worried there for a minute. I don't know if I told people this. I think I did say this on here. I was trying to do a freaking food change, and that did not work. I mean, it is not allowed. She can only have one kind of food. So, but she's doing awesome right now, and she's about to go get one of those cans. But we're going to be starting up right now, folks. Appreciate everyone for being in here, and let's fucking go. Thanks for coming in here. Let's roll here. Boom. First of all, make sure I got the sound right. And we got an hour and 8 minutes here tonight with Steve Renteria. Well, let's go. I think I will get a brewski. Instantly,
all parties are present, jurors and the alternates, and the witness. You may proceed, Mr. Ford.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Renteria. I wanted to pick up where we left off, and we were talking about a sample that you did that was taken as a result of a sexual assault kit collection from Lana Clarkson at the coroner's office. And I would like Mark next in order an evidence receipt that bears the
Taryn Dusty, thank you so much for that share. Appreciate that. And there we go. Lexi the Law Nerd, True Crime Watcher, always sharing my shit out. Thank you so much. That's freaking awesome. I love that. Hell yeah. City Kitty with a share here tonight. Afton with a share here tonight. Brooklyn with a share here tonight. Guys, that helps so freaking much. You guys are unbelievable. Thank you so much for that. Let's roll.
Name J321612. Have it marked next in order.
Boarding around. What a weird name.
Quintuple Z.
Quintuple Z.
Oh, shit, the bells. Hold on. We can't start Murder Church without the bells. Well, I'm going back to full screen, too. Ladies and gentlemen, almost got a little bit ahead of myself. I got the food on the mind. I got a brewski on the mind. I got Gypsy on the mind. Hold on. Ladies and gentlemen, get in here. Take your seats. As we get ready for a Tuesday night Murder Church episode. Phil Spector's weird ass. Ready to rock. There we go, baby. Good call.
Okay, and Mr. Renteria,
good call. We're good. Drew.
Recognize what this purports to be.
Now calling me out on it.
Yeah, this is a
right,
photocopy
I'll be right back,
of
guys.
we call it a laboratory receipt. Whenever a piece of item comes into our laboratory, it gets tagged with a special receipt number that will follow it in the laboratory until it's released to either the agency that submitted it or usually a detective that picks it up. So we call it a laboratory receipt.
Okay, and is it the laboratory receipt for this kit that was used to collect evidence from the body of Lana Clarkson?
Oh, shit. Yes. Krista coming through with a share. I see you, Krista. Thank you.
And as it was one of the items of evidence in
guys.
that kit.
All right, let's do it. Gypsy's like, what the hell's going on?
Left nipple swab that you talked about.
Talking about nipples already.
Giving a mixed
all right, I'm going to be on the phone with y'all.
I'll be right back. Consistent with Mr. Spector and Lana Clarkson.
Yes.
And I want to go back and I want to pin you down a little bit on this point regarding the likelihood that it's somebody else other than Mr. Spector in the sample. But first, I want to clarify that Ms. Clarkson was the majority contributor of the DNA in that left nipple swab sample. Is that correct?
Yes.
And are you familiar with how those swabs are collected as far as, what's used to do that type of collection?
No.
Okay. The swab that you got, that was done by Ms. Lintemood, I take it. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
And this receipt, we'll hear from her, but basically then eventually it gets to your laboratory, this whole kit. That's one of the items in it. Was it a swab that we used?
Yes, it was a swab from that particular sample that I used for the DNA analysis.
Okay, and before you do your DNA testing, at some point do you test the swab for whether it has any possible blood on it or not?
Yes.
Okay, and did you do that in this particular case?
Yes, I did.
And what was your result?
If I may refer to my notes, I might have to look at my case file. Let me...
In your notes, you say KM with a minus. Would that be a negative? But go ahead and...
No, my report has a section that says a positive presumptive blood test, and for that particular sample is not mentioned, so I can infer from that the KM test for the left nipple swab was negative.
Okay, and in fact, you tested the right swab also, the right nipple swab, but that came back positive for blood. Is that true?
Yes.
And it came back basically to just Lana Clarkson's DNA only. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and no mixture in that right sample. Is that true?
Yes.
And the same thing would, well, let me ask you this. With reference to the left swab that we've been talking about, the statistical likelihood that it would be somebody else's DNA other than Lana Clarkson as being the major contributor, what would be the likelihood of that, Mr. Renteria? Could you give us a statistical calculation as to that?
Yeah, I think I gave that. I'll give it again. The frequency of occurrence with the two assumptions,
Okay.
where there's only 2 donors on that left nipple swab, and one of which is Lana Clarkson.
See, I want to know the frequency or the likelihood that that's her DNA as opposed to somebody else's, just her alone, or can you?
Oh, I did not run that calculation.
Okay.
Since that sample was from her body, it's an assumption that the major donor, which is consistent with her types, is in fact her DNA.
Okay, so you don't question the fact that it's her DNA at all, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then basically you try to determine what the likelihood, when you take the remaining profile, you know, the non-Lana Clarkson DNA, you try to determine what the likelihood that it's somebody else other than Mr. Spector, and you basically came up with a calculation that was a likelihood that was greater than the world population. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, in other words, you test everybody in the United States, and there'd be very unlikely you would get another profile the same as Mr. Spector's.
Well, it's not matching Mr. Spector's. It's the likelihood of finding somebody else other than Mr. Spector that could have donated those foreign types found on her sample.
Okay, and basically your testimony is that you'd have to test more than twice the world population before it would be likely that you would come up with a random person that would have the same profile as Mr. Spector in this sample. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what the number means.
Okay, and not to press you, but I'm going to press you. You don't think that's Mr. Spector's DNA? You can't say that conclusively to this jury?
No.
Okay. Now, you also, as a forensic scientist, and you've been doing this for over 20 years, haven't you?
Yes.
Okay, and when you first started, they didn't have DNA testing. They had just serological testing that they would do. Isn't that true?
That's correct.
And one of the first types of tests that was done in the serological days was the ABO, the blood type. Is that true?
Yes.
And that's not done anymore because DNA is more definitive. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
But one of the tests that they used to do for serology purposes, they tried to determine whether something might be saliva or not. That was one of the types of serology type tests that one could do. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And one of the tests that was utilized back in the past and is sometimes even utilized presently is what's called an amylase test. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And that's essentially where you take a little bit of the sample and you put it on a starch medium and you intubate it or heat it up, and it may the substance may eat the gel, and then that might give you an indication it might be saliva. Correct?
Well, your description has a lot of flaws in it, but
Trying to make it simple.
There is an assay that we have that can detect if amylase is present, and finding amylase is not absolutely proof that saliva is present. However, amylase does occur in higher concentrations in saliva. Other body fluids may have it, like blood, semen, vaginal secretion. It's just most of the time in saliva it occurs at a higher level.
Okay, and actually there's an assay or way you test for amylase, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And you tested for amylase in this case, in this sample, this left nipple swab. You did that, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And you came up with a positive result. Is that true?
Yes, a weak positive for the left nipple swab.
Okay. Now, when you look at samples such as the left nipple swab, do you ever try to visualize the type of cellular material that's in the sample itself?
Yeah, part of the procedure that we have as an option is to look, to take a portion of that sample once we extract whatever is on the swab, in other words, remove whatever was on the swab, take a very small portion of that, and just a small portion, put that on a microscope slide, stain it with certain stains, biological stains, then look at it under a microscope and basically try to observe any possible cells that could be present.
Okay, and do you use like a Christmas tree type stain? Is that the type of stain you use or something else?
No, I use the hematoxylin eosin, H&E staining.
Okay, and what that will do is it will stain different cells to look differently so you can differentiate cells. Is that true?
That's true. It helps us pick out certain points on a cell where in turn will help us identify what types of cells might be present.
Okay, and did you do that with this left nipple swab at all?
I believe I did. I'd have to look at my case file.
Can you please do that? And
Yes.
You use the term NEC in your notes. When you look at your notes, see if you use that term.
Okay, I've indicated that particular smear on the slide that I made. I did not observe any sperm cells.
Might have to shed this hoodie here. It's already getting hot down here now. It's cold as
There
fuck a
was some
moment ago.
miscellaneous
Running up them
debris
steps.
that usually occurs because of the swab material. You get some fibers from the swab actually that come off and go onto the slide. And I did see possible epithelial cells, but the staining wasn't strong enough for me to say absolutely those were epithelial cells present on that pellet.
Okay, I want to ask you just some follow-up questions for the jury's understanding. Would an epithelial cell be the type of cell that would slough off in a person's saliva and mouth? Is that the type of cell you might find?
Yeah, that's one source. The epithelial cells usually line the mucous membranes in openings within the human body, like the nasal passages, the mouth, the urethra on a penis, that vagina, vaginal secretions, rectal sample. All of the linings inside those areas have what are called epithelial cells.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, epithelial cells, like any nucleated cell in the body, would have DNA in it?
Yes.
Okay, and that would have the entire DNA molecule, as you've testified, in that particular cell if a cell was present in an epithelial fashion. Is that true?
Yeah, if there was one intact cell with the nucleus, it would have the entire DNA within that one cell. It wouldn't be enough for us to get a DNA profile because it's just one cell. We would need a lot more to get a profile. But it is true, the entire DNA molecule would be inside it.
Okay, it's the type of cell that has that. There are some cells that don't have a nucleus, like red blood cells, and you can't get DNA out of them, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, with reference to your testimony that you gave regarding Ms. Clarkson's wrist swabs, they were also part of the collection kit that you were given?
Yes.
Okay, so when you were asked about that by Mr. Jackson, that came out of the same kit that the left nipple swab was. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay, and were you able to, you mentioned that as to some of those swabs, depending on where they were, some of them had mixtures that included possibly Mr. Spector. Is that true?
Yes.
And let's talk about those just briefly. I want to go through them. The left inner wrist swab, that was one of the ones that was tested. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did it have a lot of different locations where you identified somebody that could be Mr. Spector?
No.
Okay.
Very few.
Very few. Okay.
We do learn a lot of scientific awesomeness at church here at the old murder church, don't we?
And were you able to come up with
I don't know if I'm
any type
retaining all of it,
a
but we're learning a
likelihood
lot.
that it's
That's
Mr.
for damn
Spector
sure.
versus somebody else's DNA in that particular swab?
Yes.
Okay, and what was it?
Again, it was the same type of frequency estimate where two assumptions were made, the same assumptions, 2 people, she's one of them. How many other people other than Mr. Spector would be included as a possible donor?
And there could
for
be
the-
more than 2, correct?
I'm sorry?
Could be more than 2 people in this particular sample, is that true?
It was consistent with 2 people, but yes, one could say it could be more, but the evidence from the DNA typing that I saw was more consistent with just 2 people.
Okay.
The number for the Caucasian population was 1 in 26.
Okay.
So 1 out of every 26 individuals, males, I would
PJ in the
expect to
house.
also
What's up,
be
PJ?
included as a
Thank you for
possible
being here.
donor.
If you've walked through that door, which I think PJ just did because we just hit 18 from 7. Oh, there's another one. Maybe that one was PJ. If you haven't hit that like yet, hit it. Smash that guy
The
into the
foreign
ground. Punch him in the
types
face.
found on the left
Pretend like
inner
you're
wrist.
punching YouTube in the face when you hit that thumb.
Now, with reference to that particular swab, the left inner wrist swab, did you also do a Kastle-Meyer test on that?
I believe I did.
And was it positive?
Yes, it was.
And when you have your notes out, the left outer wrist swab, was it also positive for Kastle-Meyer presumptive blood test?
Yes, it was.
And your right wrist swab, was it also positive for blood?
Yes.
Okay, so all 3 of the swabs that you got DNA results on were positive for blood that were collected. Is that correct?
Correct.
Cutler. Why does Cutler even show up? Son of a bitch. I'm watching you, you son of a bitch.
Mr. Renteria, I want to ask you some follow-up questions about the pants that you tested, and you were shown a picture of some inside out of a pair of trousers, and this is 4.148, and I asked that be marked next in order.
Sextuple A.
Sextuple A.
Sextuple A.
Short. You see this exhibit here, Mr. Renteria?
Yes, I do.
And this is one of the ones I think was shown to you as one of the people's exhibit. And basically you see on one side of it, this would be the left pocket on this side, correct?
Yeah, it's turned inside out already.
Right. So you turn it inside out, it's still, this is the fly, right? Where the zipper is.
Right, correct.
Okay, and you see these little.
Yeah, I'm just trying to picture turning my pants inside out. And
Okay. I'm going to avoid saying that same thing.
Yeah. Please don't picture that.
Keep it to yourself.
Well, let's get into the nightclub angle.
Right now.
You know what? The only person not laughing here, and he's actually showing a slight little smirk for the first time.
Let's. This
Fucking
is
feel.
the blood here.
And still looking like a fucking psychopath.
That you tested
Clenched
that came
jaw,
back to Lana Clarkson, is that
shaky
correct?
hands.
I think that would be the left pocket,
Okay.
the outside surface of the left front pocket.
Okay, and then.
I think you're right,
and
both
basically
of
you saw, there were some, I'm not going to show another picture, but there was other stains in that pocket too, is that correct?
Yeah, this picture here is a poor picture to represent the blood that was present on the inside of the pocket. I believe there's another picture that shows a lot more staining that was present.
Right, on the flip side behind here, correct?
Inside, not behind it.
Oh, I see.
Actually inside. If you pulled that pocket out from the inside, then you would be seeing the inside surface.
Okay, and my question is that do you think, based upon what you saw there, that the blood was deposited on the inside of the pocket versus the outside of the pocket as shown here?
It was more consistent if you saw the inside of the pocket as being deposited on the inside of
Okay,
the pocket.
and that's the test. You tested several areas of the pocket to confirm it was Lana Clarkson's blood on the left, in the left pocket, inside the left pocket, basically.
Yes.
Okay. Now, did you look in the right pocket at all?
Yes.
And did you see anything that you collected as a stain that you thought might be blood?
No.
Okay. Now, these pants were a pair of Hager black slacks type pants, is that correct?
Yeah, if I refer to my notes real quick.
Okay. Expandomatic Hager is what you have in your notes, so whatever that means. It's page 33.
Oh, you have a page number. Thank you.
Okay.
Good question, I don't know.
Yes, one pair of black Expandomatic Hager pants.
Okay, and did you, when you were looking at this item, did you do that with Dr. Harold, or did you do it on your own?
I believe I recall that we did it together because, again, she was doing the reconstruction part of this case, and we were, she may have noticed the stains before even I did, and with her help, we selected a subset
Yo, Seeking Justice, welcome in here.
of the stains that were present to go to further DNA typing.
Okay, so all the stains that you collected were from the left pocket area of the clothing, is that true?
Yes.
Okay, and basically, she screened it for the entire garment, the legs, all the other areas, isn't that true?
That's my understanding.
Okay, and she didn't point out any stains that she wanted you to test that were on the pants themselves, is that correct?
That's correct.
And she was looking for little teeny stains, big stains, whatever stains might be present anywhere on this garment, is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay, and doing this microscopic analysis that you described, is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Now, did you look at the rest of the garment to see if there was something you thought might be blood other than this left pocket area?
I did look at other areas on that particular pair of pants.
Did you? Let's talk about just any blood on the outside of the pants. Let's say the front of the pants, the back of the pants, the sides. You know, did you see anything that you thought might be blood?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said any other biological materials.
Yeah, I want to kind of limit it to blood for...
Just blood. No, I didn't see any.
Okay, so did you look at what would be the outside of these pants? Let's say, the pant legs in the front or on the side, the back, places
Yes.
like that. You didn't see anything that you thought would be blood that might be testable, is that true?
That's true.
Okay. And had you seen anything like that, you would have first done a Kastle-Meyer test to confirm its presumptive blood status and then do DNA testing, is that correct?
Yes, I either would have done a Kastle-Meyer or relied on Dr. Harold's microscopic identification of blood.
Okay. Mr. Renteria, I want to ask you about something you did, and I'm going to try to finish up here in the next couple of minutes, and I appreciate your patience with me, but I'm going to ask you to look at Exhibit JJJJ, 4 Js, and then another exhibit.
4
And I'm going to be
Js.
asking you about what you described in one of your reports as tooth material, possible dental material, okay?
Do I have that? Jeff?
It's right here.
Okay.
JJJJ. Do you recognize
4
what's
Js.
depicted in this particular photograph?
Yes, that's looking inside the
4
foyer,
Js.
basically standing at the threshold of
see
the
it.
south door, looking in and down towards the paneled wall of the lower stairway.
And basically, this photograph is by the back door. It has an item number 4, which was some type of a latch from the door, correct?
Correct.
We call it a deadbolt latch.
Yes.
Okay, and then item 5 was other material that basically you documented as in your report as far as its collection. Is that true?
Yes.
And in your report, you document 2 pieces of hard white material, parentheses, possible dental material, and wood fragments collected from the rear foyer door.
Correct.
Okay? And you were the one that was responsible for documenting the number of particles and the type of material that was present. Is that true?
That's true.
Now, this particular item was already located by the detectives once you arrived. Is that also correct?
I don't recall. It may have been since it was right inside the door. I don't recall if they pointed it out and put a number down first, or if they had me look at it once they pointed it out and I put a number down. I don't
Okay.
recall what the steps were.
Or Mr. Kyle could have saw it? You don't really recall?
It was observed and the number was placed before Mr. Kyle arrived.
Okay, now, the next, if we could have a picture of the stairs exhibit, I think it's, hold on a minute.
You just push rosin. Get the fuck out of the way.
This is a picture
man
of
is
the
a-
stairway
This man has a fine ass mustache, is what we have not talked about. Good lord.
at the
Comb that
residence,
son of
and
a
the
bitch.
bathroom would be over
It's
to
gotta
the
have a
right,
little
correct?
comb,
Correct.
little brush for
And
it.
over here you can see the 4 and the 5, but not very well. Is that true?
Yes.
And then you see here 2 other markers. That's 10 and 11, but you can't really make out the
conditions
numbers
that
very well.
bastard.
Is that true?
That's true.
Now, these markers were already down about the time that you got there. In other words, these were identified, and you saw these upon your arrival at some point, correct?
Correct.
And were the markers were there, to your knowledge, before Mr. Kyle actually physically got there. Is that true?
I believe that's true, yes.
Okay, and the way it works at the death scene when something's being investigated, such as this, is that the detective sometimes will look and mark things or tell you things are there, and then eventually they get tagged with a number. Is that true?
That's usually how it works, yes.
Okay. Now, you gave some testimony regarding the coat that Mr.
nice.
Spector was wearing.
I
or
could
at
grow
least
one
the
like
coat
that.
he was purported to wear that was found in the bedroom or
I
the
can comb
dressing room
on, but
upstairs.
you know what I'm talking about. He's got
you touched
long
a number of
lips. You gotta have a
stains.
long upper lip to be able to really get down. Like, you gotta have a lip like down to here from your nose. Like, my lips are a little too high. Like, I got a little bit of a more skinny upper lip here. You gotta have longer lips for a long,
19?
nice stash.
Yes.
And some of those
Look at that
stains
thing.
came back as
Well, you know
having-
what? I'm gonna be honest. He looks like he has tiny lips and it's rapping hard. Looks like he eats his mustache with every
a
bite.
mixture Lana
good stash.
Clarkson's DNA and Mr. Spector's DNA.
I don't know. He's got that. I'm changing my opinion once again. Right in the middle. That's a nice separation, and it looks like a natural separation with the mustache as well. That doesn't look like he's added that, and he's got it combed off nicely. He's got a nice part as well. This is a distinguished mustache. This is a grade A fucking stash.
You remember giving that testimony?
Wow.
Yes.
Would it be unusual for somebody that owned a garment, a coat, to have their own DNA on that coat?
No, it wouldn't be unusual.
It's a beaut.
1.109. Ask that this be marked next in order.
Sextuple B.
If you could look at this picture, Mr. Renteria, and ask if you recognize what's in this
proper
particular
stash.
photograph.
Well, it appears to be a photograph with somebody standing at the second floor railing, pointing the camera almost straight down onto the foyer of where Miss Clarkson was seated. And then you could also see on the bottom of the orientation now the steps of the stairway.
Okay, and so you see item 11 here, basically, and 10 here, is that correct?
Yes.
And those items were eventually collected, is that correct?
Correct.
And now getting back to the photograph, you see it looks like LA investigators, and they've got their jackets on, is that correct? If we could highlight this portion here.
Yeah, LA coroner investigators.
Okay, and this particular photograph shows a number of people in white shirts, 3 people in white shirts. Who would they be?
I really don't know. I think I recognize Detective Lillianfield, which would be the person with the white shirt on the top right of the photo.
Right here?
Yes.
Okay, and then two other...
Kneeling down with the gloves on appears to be Detective Katz, K-A-T-Z. And I'm not sure about the individual on the left.
Okay. Now, the person that's holding what appears to be a weapon or a gun, that person has or can you tell in this photograph what he's holding?
No, I believe the other person on the left is, his hand is blocking.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see the gun there.
Okay, let me ask you this question. Basically, at a scene like this that was being investigated, everybody that was picking up an item or touching an item should have been wearing gloves. Is that true?
Yeah, if it was an item that potentially was going to be analyzed for...
If this was Phil Friday, and we talking thick, we'd be talking about something altogether else, huh? Be a hog party.
DNA, and if you were going to actually use your hands to grab something, it's always a good idea to use gloves so you don't get your own DNA possibly on that item.
Okay, and basically, because if you touch it, you might end up getting some of your DNA on it, correct?
It's possible. Like if you touched an area that had no other body fluid in it, you can possibly produce enough cells, we call it touch DNA, to touch the item and possibly leave enough where it might be detected.
Okay, and if you, even if you're wearing gloves, if you touch somebody or you touch yourself while you're wearing gloves, then you touch an item, you can do the same thing, even though you're wearing gloves. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so let's say that somebody wearing gloves wiped their brow or was wearing the gloves for a period of time, maybe sweating, and they touched another part of their body, they could inadvertently transfer a small amount of DNA to an item.
That's possible.
Okay. Now, you talked about being careful to sample some items because you were looking for saliva, like you mentioned the rims of the glasses, the tops of bottles and so forth. And was that because that some of those items were being sent for other forensic identification work?
Yes.
Well, what forensic identification work was being considered?
I believe for those items, the glasses and the bottles, they were going to be, or had already been, I'm not sure, again, the order, sent to Latent Prints, the chemical processing department, to look for any possible prints on those items.
Like, for example, when you looked at the holster, do you remember whether it had been processed for prints at that time or not?
Yeah, I don't know if the holster was or was not processed.
Now, were there any people that worked for your latent print section of the laboratory, were there any of those people that were at this investigative scene on the 3rd of February of 2003?
Yes.
Okay. Was the scene, in general, did they do any latent print processing of furniture, walls, things of that nature?
I don't know either way.
Okay. Specifically, that bureau that is right behind the person that is at the top of the photograph here, do you know whether that was a process for latent prints?
I don't know.
Are you able to look at an item if it's been processed for latent prints and tell whether it's been tested? In other words, do you see the black powder at all, or?
Sometimes. If there's depends on the type of substrate it is. If it's a really white item and they're dusting with black powder and they used a lot of it, sometimes you can see the powder. But I've also seen items that have been processed where there's nothing visible as far as powder residue left. Mm-hmm. So on occasion, you can tell.
Okay. And you don't have any record or recollection of that in this particular case, is that true?
That's true, no recollection.
Okay. Do the latent print people do something other than just look for latent prints?
Yeah, I think I described yesterday that the individuals from the latent print section are also trained to take photographs at the crime scene, which they did here, and also to do sketching of a crime scene, and I think that's what one of their responsibilities was at this scene. So it's not just latent prints.
Okay. Did you take measurements at this scene where various things were at particular times or anything such as that?
No, one of the latent prints personnel was responsible for the measurements.
Okay. If I could have a minute, Your Honor?
Yes.
Every time this happens, Judge Dowhard should just tell a joke. He should just be prepared with a joke.
Mr. Renteria, we talked at length about evidence that was collected from Ms. Clarkson's sexual assault kit that was collected by Ms. Lintemuth. Did your laboratory also receive a sexual kit that was collected from Mr. Spector that you had anything to do with?
Yes.
Okay, and did that have a number of samples in it also?
Yes, it did.
And did you subject any of those samples to DNA testing?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I want to ask you about a particular sample, and that sample has to do, it's referred to as a scrotum sample, something that's basically swabbed from the scrotum area of a person's body. You familiar with that type of sample?
Yes.
And
If we see Phil Spector's scrotum, I'm out!
when you've seen
We
these
don't want that hog coming through
collection
now.
kits, I take it
Lord.
you see those on a somewhat regular basis. Is that true?
Well, unfortunately, male rape kits, if we had a case of an alleged rape, let's say, and somebody is arrested, it's not very frequent that a sexual assault kit from the suspect will be collected. We're seeing a little more of it now with the forensic nurse practitioners are doing a really good job, and the investigators are doing a good job getting suspects to a hospital to get this evidence done, but it's not routine. Yeah, I hope it is routine one day, but
Okay.
we do see them.
Okay, and basically, looking at the female kit, certain things are collected. With the male kit, certain things are collected that are, some are the same and some are different, obviously.
Different parts, yes.
Different parts of the body?
Yes.
So would it be true that one of the male collection swabs that is in the kit is this area of the human scrotum under the penis?
Of the male scrotum, yes.
The male scrotum, okay. And basically, these kits have prepackaged swabs in it, and basically the nurse that is doing that is, knows how to collect it from the appropriate area. That's the way it works. Is that correct?
No, not necessarily. The
Bill,
kits that we have are
probably
general
put a gun
sexual
on the
assault
nurse.
kits. So the nurse practitioner would have to have been trained to know what type of samples to collect from a male. We don't have an envelope that says scrotum, collect here. They would have to take a swab that hasn't been used in a new kit, collect that sample from that area, then label the box that the swab is in scrotum sample.
Okay.
So we don't have specific male kits.
Oh, okay. So they're basically kind of put together and they're labeled like that?
That's right.
Okay. And did you receive a kit that had Mr. Spector's name on it and information regarding, the taking of that type of sample?
Yes.
Okay. And basically the nurse that is that does this has some type of training generally in doing that. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay. And was this a nurse? Did this nurse fill out forms associated with this kit?
Yes.
Okay. And for example,
That calls for hearsay, unless he was there when the nurse filled out.
Sustained, it's stricken, the jury's admonished to disregard the last answer.
Okay. Well, without saying what's on the form, did you get a form that was filled out?
Yes.
Regarding Mr. Spector, it had his name on it. It was.
Yes.
Okay. You logged it in as evidence at the sheriff's department, correct?
The form was part of the kit. It was inside the sexual assault
Okay,
kit.
how did you get his kit? Did it come to you, just somebody leave it on your doorstep, or did some law enforcement agency give it to you? How did it come about you got this kit from Mr. Spector?
The investigator in this particular case, one of the investigators delivered it to the lab and gave it to me personally in the laboratory. Then it was recorded within our evidence tracking system with the lab receipt number.
Okay, and who was that investigator, if you know?
For my notes, very quickly.
If you could give me the page number, that way I could follow along with you.
I'll have to look at my case file.
Nothing else is going on. Shot of Phil.
Fournier?
Give me a shot
You
of
put that
the
in your
Judge
report
Dahart.
typically?
Give me a shot of
Not typically.
Bruce Willis. Well, Larry Fiddler hanging up
I
there,
received
probably
the
being
kit
fucking
on
awesome.
February 5th, 2003 from Detective Katz.
Okay. And the kit itself had some type of inventory where forms were filled out that are typically sent along with these kits. Is that true? In other words, that there's a standardized form that comes with it?
Yeah, the form we were previously talking about was inside the kit.
Okay, and in the kit were a number of items were packaged and labeled. Is that true?
Yes.
And I want to get to the one that had the scrotum swab kit. Did you do a Kasselmeyer test to determine whether or not there was any presumptive blood on the scrotum swab?
Let me see if I indicate that in my report, otherwise I'll have to go to my notes. Yeah, yes, I did. Negative results for the Kasselmeyer, the KM test, were obtained for the scrotum sample.
And did you then analyze the sample to determine whether or not you could develop a DNA profile?
Yes.
And did you, as a result of, you went through each step, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with the sample, is that correct?
Yes.
And were you able to successfully get a profile that you could later compare to other people?
Yes, I was.
And was it a single person sample, or what, did it have more than one person's DNA in that sample?
It was consistent with a mixed profile, consistent with two individuals.
Okay, were there several DNA locations that showed more than 2 alleles?
There were 6, more than 2. I'm sorry.
That should be
Let me
the rule.
recount that. There were 4 of the 9
Things you didn't expect
DNA
to hear today.
markers
You
I
hear it
tested
3
for in that
times,
sample
2 times even.
that
You
showed
gotta
more
do a
than
shot.
2 alleles.
I got a little maker's
Okay, so
mark
by-
up there.
By definition,
Cassie, like, why are you taking a shot randomly? You don't know the scrotum rule, babe?
since, again, we get back to the inheritance thing, 1 from each parent. When you see 3, you know that there's got to be more than 1 person contributing to that sample, correct?
Yeah, I think that's what I said. It's consistent with 2 individuals.
2 individuals, and did you calculate a frequency or a likelihood as to that second person? Well, first of all, let me ask you this question. The majority of that sample came from the presumed donor of the sample, Mr. Spector, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so kind of the opposite with the left nipple sample, that was presumed to be
Yeah, all
Ms.
her-
Clarkson,
her
and that was
hilarious.
consistent with her type, correct?
Correct.
And this one, presumed to be Mr. Spector, because they took it off his body, basically.
That's correct. It'd be expected.
Oh,
Expected that he not only have his DNA where it was found, but he was the majority contributor. Is that true?
Yes.
Then you actually looked at the minor contributor. That was foreign to Mr. Spector. Is that true?
That's true.
And did you do a likelihood or a frequency as to the likelihood as to how rare that frequency was?
Yes.
And what was the number that you came up with?
Again, in this particular case, I made 2 assumptions, that there were only 2 donors to this mixed stain on the scrotum, and that, in this case, Phil Spector was one of the donors. Lana Clarkson, for the foreign types that I did find, was consistent or could have originated those foreign types. So the frequency estimate gives you some idea of how common or how many other individuals out there by chance would also be included as the minor donor on that particular sample. And the frequency estimate, given those assumptions.
Dude, there's a... So anybody that's ever watched Rick and Morty, this is probably something from that universe, but like, you know, there's a universe or like a dimension out there where, you know, instead of opening up apps or your phone with your thumbprint, maybe you're doing it with your nutsack, you know, or would that just be an option for men, or would women have to buy like a nutsack pocketbook? They'd be carrying around this random nutsack and they're like, oh, hey man, what do you got? Well, obviously you have to open your phone with it.
For the Caucasian population was 1 in 94,000.
There's a dimension out there where that's a thing now.
And the reason the number is low is there weren't a lot of DNA markers that gave.
Maybe just make it an option. Maybe just make it an option. All right. I'm looking at you, Android, iPhone. Get in there.
Genetic type consistent with her reference sample. In fact, I was only able to use 3 of the 6 where I could clearly see foreign DNA that could have come from Lana Clarkson.
You don't judge me. Don't judge me.
So,
in my lifestyle,
putting this
pal.
in sort of a perspective, if you would start testing people one after the other, you'd have to go through 93,999 before it would be likely that you would find another person who had that same profile as Lana Clarkson as evidenced in this sample.
No, that's the wrong way to state that. I wouldn't have to look at 94,000 people, then the next person would also be included.
God.
I would have to look at a group of 94,000, and my best estimate is I would find 1. It could be the first person or the middle person.
That's a different kind of sci-fi movie. Those are probably
or
made
the last
actually.
person, but only 1 with that
We went
size
too far
population.
left.
Okay, so we take a city of 94,000 people, and you test the entire city, and you might find 1 that has the same profile that you found in this sample. Is that correct?
That could be included as a possible donor to the foreign types on that sample.
But you compared the types that you found in this sample to the reference sample of Lana Clarkson, and all the foreign types were consistent. Each one that was foreign to Mr. Spector was consistent with Lana Clarkson. Is that true?
She had those types, that's correct.
Now you also
Oh, God in heaven, it just hits you, doesn't
did
it?
a amylase test on this particular sample. Is that true?
Yes.
Goodness
And it was
gracious.
My affirmative report.
Halloween came way early with this fucking trial.
Yes, a
Jesus
very
fuck.
weak positive, but amylase was detected in a small amount on that particular sample.
Next in order.
Sextuple C.
showing you a document that has been marked Sextuple C.
I didn't see that one coming.
I'm going to ask you to just look at this yourself and tell me whether you recognize what it is.
Yes, this appears to be the first page of the form that we talked about earlier that was included in the sexual assault kit from Phil Spector.
Now, as part of your laboratory procedures, do you keep records of when you get evidence, what evidence you get, what you do with evidence, and things of that nature?
Yes.
And as part of the business that is done by your crime laboratory, do you keep those records and retain them so that you would always have a documentation as to the type of work that you do?
Yes.
In fact, you're required, Mr. Jackson.
Lauren in the house, what's up?
I asked you a number of questions about lab certification. You're required to keep these records to maintain your laboratory certification.
We're not having any kind of weird conversations in
correct?
here.
And in order to give opinions and to do the testing that you do, you have to carefully document your receipt of evidence, what you do with it, how you repackage it, things of that nature. Is that correct?
Yes.
And if you don't keep records, then basically you wouldn't be able to operate as a certified laboratory doing DNA work. Is that correct?
That's right. If we got accredited and it was shown that our record keeping was a little lax, that'd be definitely something we would have to improve before we would be accredited.
Okay, and you rely upon your record keeping as part of your evaluation of a case. In other words, the fact that you do keep records of receiving evidence and handling of the evidence. In other words, that's all part of the scientific procedure that allows you to do the type of work you do and come to court and give opinions such as you've given in this case.
Well, I wouldn't say it's part of the scientific procedure, but it would be part of the chain of custody of trying to determine when a kit was submitted, when did it go to evidence, under what lab receipt number, what day it was transferred to a particular individual, and so on. Basically following it through the laboratory. And it's done a few ways, sometimes in handwritten notes by the analyst, but it's also done electronically through a computer system that we have in the laboratory called the evidence tracking
44 of 108 left of this one. I'll be right back.
Or ETS.
I'll be right back, guys.
Okay, and you rely upon this evidence tracking system and also the documentation of your receipt of evidence in giving opinions about a case. In other words, if you didn't have a chain of custody on an item that you were going to test, you would have to get that before you could really give an opinion on that subject, correct?
Brewski Ron?
Well, if you asked me what day I got a piece of evidence, I would either find it in my case notes or part of the evidence tracking system. It wouldn't have anything to do as far as my opinion if the DNA matched a person or not, but it would clarify or give the answer to when I received that particular piece of evidence.
Okay, in quadruple C, that document that I just handed you, or no, excuse me,
Sextuplet.
Sextuple C. Sextuple C. That's one of the many chain of custody documents, records that you have in your file. Is that correct?
This form has nothing to do with when it was received in the laboratory. This form, like we described before, is filled out by the forensic nurse practitioner, and it has nothing to do with when the kit actually came into the laboratory or where the different transfers occurred.
Okay, do you look at that form to basically see whether or not the evidence that is listed on there, and that's a multi-page form, I just gave you one page, but do you look at it to see if it, one comports to the other?
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll read the form that is filled out by the nurse and compare it to the items in the actual sexual assault kit. And then there's also other information on the kit as far as when the incident or alleged incident occurred, when the sample was collected, how much time frame lapsed in between. Then it also has information on the subject or whoever the individual was where the kit was collected from.
Okay. And you basically take into consideration all that information so that you can intelligently analyze items that are in the kit. Is that correct?
Yeah, at times it is helpful for us to try to determine if we're not going to look at everything in the kit, what should we concentrate on first? If the victim said she was raped, vaginally, then we may concentrate on the vaginal swabs first. Or if it was an oral copulation only and nothing occurred vaginally or rectally, then we might choose to look at the oral samples first. So we do use it to help us guide what items we're going to look at initially if we're not going to look at them all at one time.
Okay, and that exhibit that you have, sextuple C, is basically one of the, is part of your case file that you looked at and you considered before you tested the items in the kit, correct?
Right. Again, it is a form that is contained in the sexual assault kit. We remove it and put it into the case file.
Okay, and did you compare that form that came with the kit, the one that you have the face page
Dom's mom, what's
now,
up?
and
Thanks for coming
to
through.
make sure that it was what
Appreciate
it
it.
purported to be. In other words, that the collection items matched with the collection paperwork.
I believe I would
What's a
have done
Steve
that.
Wazzer
yes.
drinking,
That's part of
baby?
your normal
Cracked
procedure,
wide
is that
open.
Yes.
Okay. And that particular kit had the name of Philip Spector on it, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that particular kit was the one that had the scrotum swab that you have given testimony on regarding the mixed sample, is that true?
Yes.
Did it also have some swabs from the left hand and right hand?
Yes, it did.
Okay, and so they were part of the kit. Is that also true?
That's true. That's
Okay,
correct.
and did you do anything with those left and right hand swabs?
Yes.
Did you, let's talk about a right hand swab. Did you analyze that to determine whether or not you had suitable quantities of DNA to get a result?
Yes, I did.
And did you get a result?
Yes.
And did you get a result that was consistent with one person or more than one person?
The result was consistent with with a mixture, number one, and it was consistent with coming from 2 individuals.
Okay.
On the right-hand sample.
And was the major contributor to the right-hand swab sample, was it Philip Spector?
Yes.
And you would expect that since it was taken from his hand, is that true?
That's correct.
Was there a minor contributor that was consistent with Lana Clarkson?
Yes.
And how did you make that determination?
Again, when we have a mixture, we first try to determine how many individuals could have donated to that mixture. In this case, it was consistent with 2. And everywhere there was a foreign DNA type, I would examine that and take into consideration Lana Clarkson's reference sample to see if this hand sample had a foreign type, does Lana Clarkson have that type? And that's how I would do the comparison.
Okay, and basically you compared the minor contributor alleles to Lana Clarkson, and each one of the minor contributor alleles were consistent with Lana Clarkson's DNA profile, correct?
Correct.
Now, did you do a statistical frequency on that particular sample?
Yes.
And what did you find?
On this particular sample, there was more information as to the second donor. The same assumptions were made as on the scrotum sample, but because there was more foreign types detected, the number is higher, and in this case, the frequency estimate, given the 2 assumptions I previously stated, the frequency of occurrence for the Caucasian population is 1 in 406 trillion. That's with a T.
Okay, and the same analysis, in other words, if you took that number of people, then you might find one person within that group that was consistent with Lana Clarkson, correct?
Another person in the group that could have also donated the foreign types.
Okay. And you also subjected that right-hand swab to a Kastle-Meyer presumptive blood test. Is that true?
Yes,
And your result was that it was negative. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Now, in the left-hand swab, you also found a mixture. Is that also correct?
At one particular DNA marker, there was a foreign type that could not have been donated from Phil Spector. The left-hand sample gave only enough DNA to do the one test, so I was only able to get 9 DNA marker results. One of those 9 gave one type that could not have come from Phil Spector.
Okay, so there was one foreign allele at one location that was foreign to Mr. Spector on his left-hand swab. Is that true?
Yes.
And or were you able to say how many people might have been able to contribute that particular allele?
No, it's so little information with that one type that I'm not able to make a comparison of who could be included as a possible donor.
Okay.
There's just not enough genetic information from the one type at the one marker.
Okay. If I could have a minute, Your Honor?
Yes.
Creepy bastard lurking.
Now, in addition to the sexual assault kit that you processed for Lana Clarkson, we talked about that. Some of the samples that we talked about for Mr. Spector, the scrotum swab. Did you also or was there also a swab in Mr. Spector's sexual assault kit that was labeled a penile swab?
Yes.
Okay, did you test that for genetic markers?
Yes, I did.
And did you find that it had, well, first of all, did you do a presumptive blood test on it?
Check my report. Yes, I did. The results for the KM presumptive blood test was negative.
And did you determine whether or not it had a mixture of DNA on it or one person's DNA?
Yes, the DNA types obtained from the penis sample from Mr. Spector was consistent with originating from 2 individuals, so it was a mixed sample.
Phil's penis gave me the shivers.
And did you include or exclude Lana Clarkson?
Lana Clarkson is excluded as being a donor to that mixture.
Did you get a positive amylase result on that?
Yes.
And did you get did you do a microscopic analysis of the cells that were in that particular sample?
I'd have to
Shot
check
for
my
the
case file
penis.
for that.
Okay, why don't you take a minute and do that?
Oh, Lord. Ah, he's looking into our souls. Creepy bastard. That man's creepier than hell. That man's creepier than hell. I'm glad he's in jail, but he's dead. He died.
Yes, I did do a microscopic exam on a portion of that particular sample.
And did you see nucleated epithelial cells?
Yes, I saw a few in that particular sample.
Okay, and we've already discussed what they consist of. And were you able to compare the major profile, and did it come back to Mr. Spector?
Yes, the major profile from the mixed sample is consistent with originating from Phil Spector.
Okay, and the minor profile basically is unknown. Is that your testimony?
Yes.
Okay. Did this particular sample, Mr. Renteria, did it get processed the same time as that reagent blank is, one that you basically got some of your DNA in?
Yes.
Okay, and do you have the table of results that shows the results for this particular sample?
Yes.
Okay, and then I gave you an exhibit before, 6 N's, NN, or maybe it was 5. Let me make sure. But it shows the table of your DNA results, of your profile. Do you have that with you?
Yes, I do.
Do you remember?
I think Miss Dina just wants me to read this out loud. Chesticles, testicles, wallet, and watch. Does anyone else say this before they leave the house? I feel like this should be like a Like a Mr. Rogers jingle. Chesticles, testicles, wallet, and watch. Does anyone else say this before they leave the house? I can't make it really go, but thank you so much for that. $4.99, Miss Dean. Appreciate it. Give me a little love for it. What are we doing? Not messing around. That's for damn sure, son. Huh?
I'm telling you like it is, baby.
For what exhibit number it was?
5N. No,
Okay.
is that an N? It looks like N's.
Yeah, it
5
looks
N's.
like N's.
Yeah.
Okay, and what I'd like you to do is to look at your report and your table of results and tell me whether or not your DNA profile can be excluded from this sample.
Well, I could tell you now without even looking at it, I did examine that as a possibility when I first got the results, and my DNA is not on that particular sample.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Renteria. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Redirect.
Thank you, Mr. Renteria, I'm going to try to walk through this a little bit quicker.
Well, shit, we get a little bit of relief here with Ajax real quick. Madeline come through real quick on the Venmo machine with a $5 holler. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate that. She says, I'm skipping the shots and going straight to the long drinks. Make it, and this is all caps, make it stop. I think we might get a little bit of relief here. And I think that's because you sent that Venmo through. Thank you so much, Madeline. Let's give you a little bit of, what are we going to give her? A little bit of that right there, son. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
If I can. First of all, based
Ajax
on Mr.
relief.
Ford's latest couple of questions, Ms. Clarkson's DNA was found on the defendant's right-hand swab, correct?
Well, he's asking if it's correct, so he can answer yes or no.
If I could just reword that statement, that
Absolutely.
the foreign types found on that particular sample, which was a mixed sample, is consistent with originating from Lana Clarkson.
Okay. And it's also consistent with originating from others that may be in a pool, a random pool that would be put together, correct?
Yeah, it would be highly unlikely for that particular sample, the right-hand sample, because that is a sample from Mr. Spector that gave a lot of information about a minor donor. In fact, the number for Caucasian, again, was 1 in 406 trillion.
Okay.
So I wouldn't expect anyone else, unless Ms. Clarkson had an identical twin,
Right.
to have that particular profile.
Significantly larger population than the Earth.
Yes.
Correct. And significantly insofar as you are comfortable saying that you would not expect any other human being on Earth to have that same, the same genetic markers.
That's right.
All right. However, conversely, with regard to the sample that Mr. Plourde brought up about Mr. Spector's scrotum, the consistent markers were such that you could only say that 1 out of 94,141 people would be expected to be grouped together before one of those individuals could have those same markers, or you'd expect statistically for them to have the same markers, correct?
Yeah, to be included as a potential donor for those foreign types. That's correct.
So in other words, based on those statistics, that's a very, very, very low number in your field, correct?
That's right.
In the field of DNA.
In the DNA field, using STRs, that is a low number.
You used numbers like...
Look this one up, and I only thinking of this because you said bimbo here. Tiff came through. When you said Venmo, I heard bimbo. Look up a movie called Assault of the Killer Bimbos. It's from '88, I believe. It's fun as fuck. It's so good. It'd be a great Feral Friday movie. I'm just going to tell you the plot real quick. It's these chicks. It starts out in like a strip club, and these ladies, somehow they're getting involved in this weird, I don't know if they're doing drugs or if it's money. Somehow something weird's going on, something fishy's happening, and they end up getting a bunch of loot from a bunch of mobsters, and they end up on the run. And at first it's 2 strippers, and then they end up while they're on the run, going to a cafe, and their waitress ends up getting in on it because they take her with her when they show up, and they have to hold her hostage, but they're not really holding her hostage. They just have to act like they are to escape. And I think the cops actually found them and they escaped, but they ended up with a 3. It's awesome. It's killer. Assault of the Killer Bimbos. It's fun as hell. 80s fun romp.
Trillion.
But also it's action. Honestly.
Quadrillion. Quintillion.
Look at boobs.
I mean, numbers with like 18 zeros following
But for legit,
the
it's
real
good.
number, correct? The integer,
Actually,
whatever
yeah.
it's called.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is a number with 3 zeros following it, correct? 94,000 and some change.
Correct.
So in other words, you would expect randomly or
Counts during the
statistically for
house.
even thousands of people in the state of California to have those same genetic markers.
Yes.
Are you aware of the largest employer here in California? The Los Angeles County, right?
I would assume the LA County.
Yeah, Los Angeles County has more than 90,000 people just in Los Angeles County.
That's the truth.
Under one roof, right?
I'm not aware of the number. I'm not aware of that number.
Under one roof, that assumes a fact and evidence absent a big roof.
That would be a very large roof. I didn't mean that literally. I will rephrase that.
I'll let you go with that, all right?
Okay. In other words, that is a number so low that you would not, as an expert, say that Lana Clarkson's DNA appeared on Phil Spector's scrotum. You would not say that, correct?
Correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
And the last point that I think Mr. Plourde was making with you before he sat down, I want to make sure I get this correct. During the course of analyzing the penal swab that Mr. Plourde brought up, you developed Mr. Spector's DNA on that swab, which would be expected, correct?
Yes.
Yet you developed a third party's DNA or portions of the markers that are not, certainly they're not from you, or any contamination, correct?
Correct.
You've ruled yourself out.
Yes.
And they're not from Miss Clarkson, correct?
That's correct.
That, those markers or that genetic material is from some person other than Philip Spector and Lana Clarkson, a third party, correct?
Correct.
You don't know when that was deposited in the sex kit. I'll leave it at that and try to remain somewhat dignified about this.
Yes. I don't know when.
Okay, you can't say a time frame or anything like that. We talked about that yesterday, correct?
Correct.
All right. I want to move back to a couple of things that Mr. Plourde brought up yesterday, specifically starting with the luminol. And I'm going to jump around just a little bit, but there's a couple of points I want to make before I sit down. Luminol is considered a much more sensitive test than KM or Kessel-Meyer testing, correct?
Correct.
Yet it's less specific. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. That jumbles around in my mind. It may jumble around in others. What do you mean by more sensitive yet less, more sensitive yet less specific? What do you mean by that?
Well, the more sensitive means that you need less blood to get a positive result. If you had a very dilute sample of blood, you're more likely going to get a positive result with the luminol than the KM reagent. So it's more sensitive in that respect. More specific means that the KM reagent will give a positive result with less items other than blood. Now, luminol I talked about yesterday basically reacts to metal, and it reacts to the iron in the blood. But as we all know, there's metal all over the place in different environments. So if you had metal shavings, let's say on a carpet, you would get a positive luminol. So it's less specific when you're looking for just blood. So that's the two differences.
So going back to that, it sounds like, well, using some numbers you gave us yesterday, the sensitivity of a KM test or a Kessel-Meyer test is about 1 part in 10,000. If there's 1 part in 10,000 out using the field study materials that you use, the swabs out in the field, if there's 1 part in 10,000 parts of other material, you would expect the KM test to render a positive result, then you'd go on with your analysis, correct?
That's correct.
Yet you're aware that luminol is as sensitive as 1 part, picking up 1 part in 5 million, correct?
That's possible. That dilute, that is possible.
I mean, it is substantially more sensitive, correct?
That's right. It's a totally different test, and the testing is done totally differently in the field. I mentioned before, and I think you mentioned, that the KM test is done by an indirect method, bringing up a sample on a swab and then testing the swab. Luminol doesn't work that way. You have to spray the luminol on the actual item, so it's sprayed directly on the item, and that's one of the reasons it's more sensitive.
And that luminol, with that level of sensitivity, was utilized on the carpet area in between Ms. Clarkson and the stairway wall, correct?
Correct.
And you got no positive results.
Correct.
You use that luminol with that level of sensitivity on the stairway wall itself, on that brown paneled stairway wall itself, and you got no positive results, correct?
Correct.
You utilize that luminol over toward the base of the stairs, going into the bathroom, correct?
Yes.
All right, and you also used that luminol in the bathroom itself and did get a positive result where the rag was lying, where that bloody diaper was lying. But other than that, no positive results, correct?
Correct.
No indication based on the luminol that any blood or blood material, tissue, in the form of blood, was sprayed or shot across that room onto the carpet, onto the wall, onto the stairway, anything like that. No suggestion of that based on your luminol test, correct?
Correct.
Take a look at what we've previously marked as People's 95. I want to go back to that for just a second. This is a set of photographs that we've previously marked to sort of highlight what you were doing around the banister, the base of the banister area. And although we've talked about these photographs being a little bit washed out, do they at least suggest the appropriate areas that you were looking at, this curled banister in photograph A, B, C, and of course D?
Yes.
Okay. Let's highlight photograph C if we could. Do you see the discoloration or the off-colored area at the forwardmost curvature of the banister here?
Yes.
All right. Is that the area that you suggested? And that's actually a much better picture when it's enlarged. You can see what appears to be off-color reddish material here and off-color reddish material here as well as here, correct?
Yes.
Does that material appear to be flowing consistent with gravity off the edge of that banister?
Yeah, it's consistent with some kind of movement downward. Again, that little lip or edge of the banister starts at kind of a horizontal level and then starts curving until it's vertical, then it even goes the other way.
All right.
On around it. And the blood was deposited on the horizontal surface of that curvature all the way down to the vertical surface.
Okay.
So it did appear consistent with having some flow activity towards going down.
If you and you luminoled this area, correct?
Yes.
And why did you luminol that area if you could grossly see blood?
Well, again, we're dealing with the garden sprayer, and we're just spraying different areas. I wanted to see if there might have been any other blood stains around the visible part that I couldn't see. So what I did is came down the handrail and in this area, and even though there was blood there and I had already collected it, I went ahead and sprayed that entire handrail. And of course, in the area where you see the photo with the blood staining, that was a very strong positive because there still was residual blood in that area.
When you wet that stain with the luminol, is it possible for the blood to have become wet in kind of mixing with the luminol and begun to drip or move?
That's possible.
Okay. So if in fact it had dripped off that handrail, say after you wet it substantially with the luminol, you would not have necessarily picked up that blood stain that then dripped off, correct?
That's correct.
Why not?
Because it would have dripped off the handrail. It wouldn't have added any forensic value to that particular stain because I know it would have dripped from that area.
Right.
And that area was already collected.
No evidentiary value to you at all?
Right.
All right.
All right, let's go ahead and take our afternoon recess. Keep in mind the admonition, ladies and gentlemen, 15 minutes, please. Thank you.
Oh, shit, we made it. All right, let's check out. Let's see where we're at. See where we're going. 51 minutes. Yeah, we'll do 51. We'll get through a 51-minute. Criminal, yes. Part 8. Holy shit. Let's see how many parts he has here. What was that? That was number 93. Okay, this is the last part of Steve 2. So we're going to finish off with Steve Renteria right now. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out here tonight. I really appreciate it. Anyone that did not hear, I'm not doing the wheel again until next Tuesday. Anybody that does do donations this week, just being generous and being amazing, That money I'm going to use for international shipping costs. I have a couple of weird ones coming up. I have a Canadian one coming up. I have some Australia ones and a couple of Ireland ones coming up, and those are kind of costly. So I'm just going to pause it just for this week. There's 4 names currently on the wheel that are going to be carried over to next Tuesday. So it is going to commence. I love the wheel, and it's going to keep happening. But yeah, I'm going to see what I can get together in the way of funds this week, and we'll see how it rocks. But yeah, let's keep going here. 51 more minutes, and we're going to be finished with Steve Renteria, and then Murder Church will be coming back again, of course, Sunday morning. The usual time frame, the OG time frame, 9 a.m. Eastern time. If you have not hit that like, do it.
Reflect all parties, jurors, alternates, and the witness or present is heretofore. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to draw your attention, Mr. Renteria, to a discussion about the bullets and a couple of exhibits that I'd like you to take a look at concerning those the bullets that you swabbed and ultimately DNA tested. What's been previously marked as People's 66 and 99. If we could put both of those up there, we can split that screen.
That's right, baby. Shipping global. Still looking at the names
There we go.
in the blog.
I want to make sure we're all on the same page, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, so I want to kind of move along and make this point or ask you if I'm correct about my assumptions, and then move off of this. When you indicated in your direct examination that you tested the tips of the 5 bullets, those are the areas where I'm highlighting right now that you're indicating that you tested, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And with, I think you said 2 swabs or 1 swab?
I used 2 in total.
Okay, 2 swabs, but all 5 bullets to try and get as much DNA material as you could from the recessed portions of those lead projectiles, correct?
Correct.
All right. And looking at People's 99, this exemplar gun, there are exposed areas of the cylinder showing at least 1, 2, 3, 4, and behind at the 6 o'clock position, there's another exposed area that is just behind that I guess it'd be the bottom portion of the barrel of the gun, correct?
Yes.
The frame of the gun, if you will.
Correct.
And Mr. Plord used a phrase called the void position, for whatever that's worth. We're all talking about the bullet in the 6 o'clock position, correct?
Correct.
And you're aware that you've seen revolvers before?
Yes.
You're aware that there's a gap between the 6 o'clock position bullet and where the frame comes down, correct?
Yeah, and what I'm not aware of is how big that gap is, but I know there is a gap.
But it's certainly not sealed.
Correct.
It allows free flow for the cylinder to turn, correct?
Yes.
All right. You see the gap right there?
Okay, yes.
Thanks, Sudi. It's about that big, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
For that gun, it's about that big.
Sort of answers that question. All right. What was the purpose, Mr. Renteria, for testing the tips of those bullets, of those projectiles?
Well, part of Dr. Harold's examination for the reconstruction is she wanted to see if there was any possible back spatter that could have occurred once the shot was fired back onto the front of the gun, which would include any exposed areas that would be directly in front of the face of Ms. Clarkson. And as you see in the photo on the right, part of that exposed area would be the live rounds that were in the position that could have received some back spatter. That was the purpose.
And were you successful in obtaining blood materials from those projectiles, from the tips of those projectiles?
Yes.
And did that suggest to you as a criminalist that that was in fact a result of a spattering event? In other words, the gun being close in proximity to a spattering event, to wit, Ms. Clarkson bleeding?
Yes.
And back spatter from the gunshot wound?
Correct.
All right. And you would expect to find, if you found the back spatter or the blood in the recesses of those bullets, you would also expect to find certain blood materials on the rest of the gun or portions of the gun, correct?
Correct.
And did you visually or grossly see blood material on the rest of the gun?
Yes.
All right, I want to change gears and move into the rest of the gun. Take a look at what's been previously marked as People 65. And we've already discussed your familiarity with these 5, or I should say 6 photographs, A through F, correct?
Yes.
I want to draw your attention to the portions of the weapon that would most reasonably be handled by a person that was firing the weapon. In other words, the grip of the weapon, all right? And that area around the grip, or the frame of the weapon where your hand might be expected to touch.
Okay.
And I want you to explain to us well, first of all, let me cover one point before I get to the next. On the left portion of the grip, you did some DNA analysis, correct?
Yes.
And you did that vis-a-vis blood. You were testing blood, right?
Yes.
And you can see blood on the left portion of the grip. Well, actually, this particular set of photographs doesn't highlight the left portion of the gun, but maybe, Sudi, if you could highlight photograph B. All right, you can see the left grip. There's some, on this photograph, there's some discolorations along in here, correct?
Correct.
Along in this area here, and along in here inside the contoured or the stamped portion of the grip, correct?
Yes.
And there was other blood that was visible to the naked eye along the inside of that left portion of the grip as well. Is that right?
That's correct.
Were those the areas that you were testing?
Yes.
And again, those were areas that were so copious with blood that you could visibly see it. It wasn't microscopic. Is that right?
That's right.
And that's what you were testing?
Yes.
During the course of that testing, you found that, in fact, Lana Clarkson's DNA matched that blood. Is that right?
Correct.
And on the left grip, you also found DNA, and Mr. Plord brought this out on cross-examination. I think we talked about it a little bit on direct. DNA that was not Miss Clarkson's. Is that correct? At least one marker.
Correct.
And it was an amylogenin DNA result or test, wherein, and that's a big word for saying boy or girl, correct?
Correct.
You found a Y marker.
That's correct.
The Y marker specifically did not match to Miss Clarkson because she's a female, and she would not have any Y markers. Is that right?
That's correct.
She would have no Y chromosomes, I should say more specifically. Is that right?
That's correct.
So you can say definitively that a male's DNA is on that weapon. Is that right?
Yes.
Mr. Plord asked you the question, is it conceivable or is it possible that it's your DNA? All right, do you remember him asking you that question?
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you what's possible in the universe. Anything's possible, I suppose. I guess it's possible it's my DNA, right?
You're male, so yes.
I'm a male, so it's possible. It's possible, to use the same kind of broad brushstroke, it's possible that it's the judge's DNA. He's
Yes.
male, correct?
Yes.
All right. I want to ask you a more specific question. Based on the controls that you have in place, are you confident that it is not your DNA from contamination?
Yes.
Explain to the jurors, if you could, in basic terms, what the controls are that are in place, and how it is that those controls are designed to highlight any contamination.
Yeah, as we discussed yesterday, the negative controls, there's two of them, one at the beginning, one kind of in the middle, and then positive controls, there's two of them. For this sample set that included this particular item, all the controls, all four of them, gave results that were expected. No results on the negative samples, and expected profiles on the positive samples. And there was no indication at all that anything went wrong with that particular extraction set. So I'm confident that that Y did not come from me, and it was probably a small amount of DNA that was present on that sample, the left side of the gun grip, that is giving me that Y activity. Very, very small amount, and that's why we only see the Y. No other types that are foreign to the victim.
I also want to make sure that the jurors understand exactly what it was that you found when you found the
Fixated on now. What are you looking at?
when you were doing some of your lab work. Most of us are not familiar with DNA. All right, so I'm going to try to use some layman's terms in my questioning. Tell me if I'm correct, or if I need correcting, please do so. There was no contamination of any evidence sample in this case, correct?
Correct.
Zero contamination of any evidence sample in this case at all.
That's correct.
All right.
Yes.
What you do before you begin a run, and I'm using that in the loosest terminology, I suppose, the loosest way. What you do before you begin a run is you start with I think you called it a blank reagent, correct? A blank reagent batch?
Reagent blank, yes.
Okay, I'll reverse myself. A reagent blank. And that blank is supposed to go through the whole system, all right? And at the end, develop no DNA to show that it's a clean blank, correct?
Correct.
All right. What you're telling us happened is at the end of one of your runs, okay? At the end of one of those runs, the reagent blank actually showed your profile. Is that right?
Yes.
So it was not an evidence sample in this case, and he swabbed from the gun, and he swabbed from, or a sample from the jacket, or from the dress, or from the chair, or anything like that. It was not any evidence sample that had your DNA in it, correct?
Correct.
It was just a blank, right?
Yes.
So you don't use that blank again. Is that right?
That's right.
In other words, what's in that blank is not contaminated in any evidence sample. It's not mixed with anything, correct?
That's right. There's no indication that that contamination was present in any other sample in that set.
All right. However, even though your profile appeared in that blank, and you ran the other samples after that blank had been run, and you ran the other samples, you were confident, based on the consistency of all the samples that you ran, that what was run in that set was fine. Is that right?
That's correct.
It was not contaminated. What you'd be worried about is if you got a profile that you had no idea where it came from, correct?
Yes.
But in this case, you knew that that evidence blank came from you, so you could eliminate everybody else, and it came from you. And all of the other samples that were run in that set were consistent with everything else you had done in this case, and you were confident that there was no problems, correct?
Correct.
Now, that was done at one time, and I think you said that you were running some of the sex kit samples when that blank came up with your DNA, correct?
That's right.
All right. Now, let's fast forward 2 months later. It was 2 months separated, 2 months apart, when you ran the samples concerning the gun and that left grip area, correct?
That's correct. It was a little over 2 months before I started the DNA extraction for the gun samples.
Tell me what you mean by that. In other words, did the gun samples or the gun sample extractions come first, or the sex kit extractions come?
The sex kit extractions were done fairly quickly after the crime scene was performed. And the gun samples, because they had to go through the reconstruction analysis for Dr. Harold, weren't even sampled probably for a month or a month and a half after the incident occurred. Then I didn't start the DNA extraction for about 2 months or a little after the sex kits were looked at.
When you started the DNA extraction concerning the gun, now we're just talking about that Colt Cobra,
Yes.
Did you run a reagent blank?
Yes, for every set, we run a separate reagent batch.
And that came out fine?
Yes.
Correct? No foreign DNA, it was clean DNA, and then you went on and did the samples regarding the gun, correct?
Correct.
It was at that time that you took a sample, or took one of the swabs from the left grip area, and determined that a male DNA appeared in that sample, correct?
That's right. It's with that set.
In that set, exclusive of the prior set that had your DNA profiling.
Correct.
All right. Is that part of why you're explaining to the jurors that you are confident that the Y amylogenin positive, I guess I would say, or the existence of that Y amylogenin is not yours?
Yes.
All right. But you do know, and I'll use this phrase even though I don't believe it exists in the law, I'll use it here because Mr. Plord did a couple of times, you're convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt that a third-party male, another male, his DNA is on that gun and it ain't yours, right?
I'm sorry, you said third party.
I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. You're convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt that a male's DNA is on that gun and it's not yours.
Yes.
But you cannot exclude Philip Spector, correct?
Correct, or any other male.
Right. Mr. Plord asked you a couple of questions about the the sink area that was swabbed in the bathroom, and whether or not you sought to do some KM testing in the basin and then down into the drain, correct?
Correct.
All right. What if and I'm assuming that you KM tested the water in the toilet as well?
Yes, I took a swab, dipped it in the toilet water,
Okay.
then tested the swab indirectly with the KM.
Okay, did you flush the toilet first?
No.
Why wouldn't you do that?
Well, one of the reasons I was doing that is to see if there could have been any trace amounts or a small amount of blood in the toilet water, enough to give a KM positive test.
Well, why would you not flush the toilet before you tested it?
It would obviously dilute whatever was there before I did the test, and I wanted to test the water at least at its most concentrated stage, but if diluting it more would give me less of a chance to get a positive result if there was a small amount of blood in there.
So the KM test came out negative.
Yes.
All right. Do you have any idea, in your opinion, let me put it this way, in your opinion, had that bloody rag been dunked in the toilet once or more times than once, and then the toilet flushed once, twice, 3 times, however many times, would you expect to find the KM positive test in that toilet water if it had been flushed a number of times before you got to it?
Objection, Foundation.
Well, this is just a hypothetical. That goes to the strength of whether there's any facts. The question is, are you able to answer the question based upon your training and experience?
Yes.
The objection is overruled. You may proceed.
And what is your answer, sir?
Yes, if the toilet is flushed multiple times, obviously every time the flush happens, it's diluting any amount of blood that is there. So I could envision there could be a number of flushes, and I don't know how many, without setting up some kind of experiment, that at some point the blood, if there was blood in that toilet originally, in the water, would be so dilute that I would not be able to get a positive KM test.
All right. And you didn't find any positive KM or the KM test did not react positive in the basin or the drain, correct?
That's right.
But you also, with gloved hands, you touched that rag. It was wet, right?
Yes, it was very wet.
I mean, it had to be wet somewhere. It didn't just become wet, I'm assuming. It wasn't raining in that bathroom, right?
Correct. And the consistency of the blood stains, because we see these things sometimes at crime scenes, it wasn't wet just with blood. We could tell sometimes if there's another fluid in there, and it was more consistent with being water that was mixed into that rag with the heavy concentrated blood stains. That's how it appeared to me when I looked at it visually.
All right. And given the fact that there was a basin that showed no signs of blood vis-a-vis a KM test, a drain that showed no signs of blood vis-a-vis a KM test, the fact that the bloody and wet rag was laying 6 or 8 or 10 inches, however far you said it was, from a toilet, the toilet was open, the seat was up. In your opinion, is it consistent with that rag having been dunked in the toilet?
Well, I would say that would be the closest water source from where the rag was found. So it could have occurred by dumping the towel or the diaper into the toilet. It was just the only heavy water source that was present in the bathroom.
You mentioned something on cross-examination under questioning by Mr. Plord, a phrase that I'd like you to explain and expound on just a little bit. Touch DNA. What is touch DNA?
Well, we use that term in the field when we're talking about DNA that may be present on items that are touched, i.e. touch DNA. And what it represents is DNA that could be present on very few number of cells that could be transferred from somebody touching an item that at the beginning didn't have any DNA. And most of the time when we're dealing with touch DNA, the amount of cells on that particular sample, because there's no body fluids, there's no saliva, blood, vaginal secretion, semen, which contain high amounts of cells in it, that particular sample is going to have a very low number. And we do touch DNA in the laboratory, not that often, but we do it. But we don't always get results just because somebody touched something. It really depends on how many cells were deposited on that particular item. So when we use that term, we're talking about low-level samples because there's very few cells that were transferred to the item, no body fluids.
If there are body fluids, do those body fluids represent a much more rich source of DNA than the touch DNA cell, than the skin cells that exist as a result of touch DNA?
Yes.
So I used an example yesterday. I just do this because it bugs him so much and he can't do anything about it right now. I'm going to steal Mr. Dixon's pen one more time. And you can see that I'm holding his pen. I'm not doing anything
Gets up and
unusual
punches
than
him.
just touching.
Listen, dude,
all right?
you think
And
you
it's a
think you can
relatively
poke
smooth
me?
surface,
Or the
black
judge?
resin surface. Assume that
Take
Mr.
the
Dixon
charge,
has been touching that pen or using that pen during the day, and I borrowed the pen from him. All right, but this time, instead of just touching it, I cut my finger and I bleed on his pen. All right, and then I take my tie or whatever and I try to wipe it off because I know he's going to be upset, and I don't like it when he gets upset. So I wipe it off and I give it to you. Okay, now that's the state of the pen.
Would you like to put that in evidence?
He made me swear I wouldn't do it yesterday.
He's glaring at me.
Assume that you get it in that state, okay? And you begin to do your DNA analysis on that pen. Assuming that Mr. Dixon has touched it previously, that I've bled on it, and there's some copious amounts of blood on it, some significant amounts such that you could actually see it, although it's been wiped or smeared. Would you expect, when you do your DNA analysis, swabbing those areas that are bloody, would you expect to find Mr. Dixon's DNA? Or
No.
be able to see his DNA, I should say?
No.
Why? Explain that to the jurors.
Again, like we discussed yesterday, we're dealing with quantities. Mr. Dixon's cells would be on that pen because he touches it all the time, and that would be touch DNA only coming from the skin cells on his hand. So even though he'll have some cells there, they'll be in very low number. If I swabbed his pen before, in this hypothetical, Mr. Jackson bled on it, I probably would expect to find Dixon's profile, if not a full profile, maybe a partial profile, based on the small amount of cells that he deposited. But in the hypothetical, once Mr. Jackson bleeds on it, and even if he wipes it, but the blood is still visible, there's so many more white blood cells from Mr. Jackson, from his blood, than the touch DNA, that when I would do the DNA extraction, amplify it, and do the typing, my expectation in that hypothetical is I would only see Mr. Jackson's DNA profile. Even though there would be some cells from Dixon, it's such a low number that it would get lost in the amplification and not even be visible at the very end of the analysis.
So that's not to say that, in other words, it would be inaccurate to say, based on those results, based on the results you've just given to the jurors in that hypothetical, that Mr. Dixon's DNA is not on that pen. That's inaccurate. You're simply saying that because of the overwhelming amount of fluid material that you've been able to test, his DNA is so small in comparison to that, that it would be overwhelmed and you simply wouldn't see it, correct?
Correct.
All right. Another hypothetical. Can we have 65 back on the board? I want to ask you basically a similar hypothetical, but with use of this Colt Cobra and the materials that we're talking about. And I want to concentrate your opinion, or I want to concentrate this question, I should say, and ask your opinion about those areas that you would expect somebody to touch when they're holding the gun naturally, all right? You saw those areas visually, and you can see the blood staining around those areas where the hand would normally go. The frame area, above and behind the trigger, the right side of the grip, the left side of the grip, those areas that the normal hand fit around. All right? You saw blood and materials on that part of the gun, correct?
Correct.
Were those fluids what you were seeking to swab up and test for DNA?
Yes. The goal was to take samplings of the blood.
All right.
The goal was not to try to find areas on the gun where no blood was visible in order to try to figure out who could have touched the gun.
All right.
So the samples I collected with the assistance of Dr. Harold were to sample the blood on those particular items around the handle.
Assuming hypothetically that that gun was in the hand of a person, all right, and that person put the gun in Lana Clarkson's mouth, all right, and the weapon was fired. The trigger was pulled, the weapon was fired.
Okay.
And a certain amount of blood blew back or came back from that injury, from that wound, all right, and it got on the gun. Those areas were then wiped or the blood was somehow moved or removed partially. You then get the gun, all right, and you swab those areas that you just described for the jurors. Would you expect to find the gun holder's DNA in those results, or would you expect to find the victim, Lana Clarkson's DNA?
It would just be from the blood, and in this case, victim's Lana Clarkson's DNA.
Similar to how you've described my blood sort of overwhelming, or my red blood cells overwhelming the DNA, the touch DNA from Mr. Dixon on the pin, is that what you're describing would likely happen in this case on the gun, in the hypothetical that I just gave you?
Yes, but it would be the white blood cells.
I said red blood cells. I knew I was going to get that wrong. It's the white blood cells that have the nuclei, correct?
Correct.
And the DNA. The red blood cells have no nucleus and no DNA, correct?
Correct.
All right. But forgetting my scientific challenges, the example that you gave about, or the answer that you gave to my hypothetical question about the pin and the overwhelming amount of DNA kind of hiding the touch DNA, that would be consistent with what you'd expect to find on the gun, correct?
Yes.
And the fact that you didn't find anybody else's DNA on that, for instance, those portions, those bloody portions of the gun, that is not surprising to you, correct?
Correct.
And it does not mean that nobody else was holding that gun or touching or manipulating that weapon, does it?
That's correct.
For real.
Yeah, have just a moment.
Yes?
Of course.
Thank you, recross.
Hold up! Hold up! Hold up!
We in this bitch. Thank y'all for
I
hanging
was
out.
going to try
Appreciate
to
it.
finish this up, Mr. Renteria. Appreciate your patience.
Oh, God,
Follow up
Lord.
on what
I got to
Mr.
get
Jackson
another
was
beer. I'll be
talking
right
to you
back.
about
Good
regarding
Lord.
Mr. Dixon's pen.
I'll be
his
right back.
favorite
We still
pen,
got
as we've referred
about,
to that. And he basically gave you sort of a
25
hypothetical
minutes? I'll be right
situation where if so much of his DNA gets on it, that would overwhelm the sample. And even though we presume Mr. Dixon's DNA would be on that, you wouldn't be able to find it. Basically, that was the point of his question. You understood that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Then there was one series of questions where you said that, well, depending on how much DNA was on that sample, on that pen, you might be able to see a partial profile of Mr. Dixon if there was just some DNA from Mr. Jackson and not a whole lot from Mr. Dixon.
No, I didn't say that. What I
Okay.
had said was if Mr. Dixon was the only one handling that pin,
Okay.
there could be enough cells just from the touch DNA for me to get a partial profile of Mr. Dixon's DNA.
Okay.
Without Mr. Jackson ever touching it or bleeding on it.
Okay. Well, if you had Mr. Jackson's DNA on that pen, would that prove that he actually touched that pen?
If I had Mr. Jackson's DNA on the pin,
In other words, just a partial profile?
well, it would depend on what type of body fluid. He could have dripped a drop of blood on it, and I would have Mr. Jackson's DNA. It doesn't mean he touched it.
Right. Look at that microphone right in front of you. We may very well find your DNA on that. You haven't really touched it, have you?
Probably everybody that's been up here.
Right. A mixture of a lot of people.
Yes.
Okay, and that's because just when you talk, a little bit of, I want to call it things that you can't even see, but a little bit of aerosolic spittle comes out, and it would land right on that microphone. In fact, if you swab that microphone, it would be loaded with a lot of people's DNA, correct?
Yes.
And you've never touched that, actually, have you?
Actually, I have, but
Okay,
if
good.
I didn't touch it,
So you might have somebody's DNA on your hand.
exactly.
And
I got to go wash my hands.
And saliva, actually, or stuff that comes out of the mouth, is a very rich source of DNA. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so Mr. Jackson could, just because he's close to that pen, he could somehow get a little bit of his DNA on that. It wouldn't be a shock to you to see that, correct? Even though he doesn't touch it.
Yes.
Okay, and you might be able to develop a profile that is as rare as the one that was on like 1 in 94,000. In other words, you might be able to say the likelihood of it being his DNA as compared to another person is 1 in 94,000. You might be able to develop that statistic. Is that true?
True.
Okay, and but if him and Mr. Dixon were both in the same room, that would be another fact that you would have to add to the. It would just be a coincidence if it was somebody else. It would be a very rare coincidence. True?
Yes.
In other words, if he happened to be in the same room and his DNA was on that pin and it was 1 in 94,000, it would be extraordinarily unlikely that it would be some random person, 1 in 94,000 people, correct?
Well, I would only deal with the DNA that I find. I wouldn't take into account as far as that number if he was in the room or not. It's what the scientific results show.
Okay, you testify 1 in 94,000, the scientific result, but the common sense tells you the fact that he happened to be in the room, common sense, outside of science, plays a part in the analysis.
Objection appears to call for speculation.
It depends. Does that play a part in your analysis?
No. As far as the DNA types and the number I obtain has nothing to do if I know somebody's in the room or not.
Okay, but the science is one aspect of it, but common sense tells you the fact that he's in the room would logically tell you that it's more likely to be his. In other words, the number is just part of the equation.
I'm going to object on relevance grounds.
I'm going to sustain it. It's argumentative. If you want to argue it later, you may. It's not appropriate for a question to this witness. Sustain.
Mr. Renteria, when you are asked whether or not there could be somebody's DNA, but you can't see it, you're basically just making a statement that your testing can't find it, and whether it's there or not is pure speculation. Is that correct?
No, I wouldn't call it speculation. It's based on experience of touch DNA type samples.
In your experience, have you ever actually done any research on touch DNA and published any reports on that or published any articles on that subject?
No, just casework, no research and no publications.
Okay. And when you talk about the touch DNA, you're not talking about a situation where somebody maybe sneezes in their hand and then they've got a lot of DNA on their hand, and then when they touch something, they're going to transfer a lot more, correct?
Right, because that goes now beyond touch DNA.
Right.
You're obviously transferring another body fluid with your hand. So when I talk about touch DNA, it's with no body fluids on your hands and you touch something.
Okay. So you really have to know the history of what a person was doing, whether they had washed their hands, not washed their hands, been touching another person, before you could really understand how DNA might get transferred more abundantly than
No shit. Plord went full fajitas. You never go full fajitas, Plord. Good Lord, bud. Figure it out, dude.
I had not done those activities, correct?
Yeah, if that's even possible to get that kind of
Thanks,
history on an
Logan.
evidence item.
A lot of
I'm gonna
times you
crack
just don't
one
know
more
what the
while the
history
hell
is unless some other DNA testing, tells you what that is, correct?
Yes.
Stone Cold Steve Austin, that son of a bitch.
I want to ask you a few questions
I'm
about
just gonna
your
chug one on here and
controls.
freak y'all out.
The control that you developed your full genetic profile in, including your male, showed you were male also, everything, correct?
No, the reagent batch that was contaminated by my DNA was a very, very small amount. And I was only able to get a partial
Got a
profile,
contamination?
meaning I was only
That
able
ain't
to
good.
amplify one kit out of the 2 kits.
Okay.
If I had enough DNA, or if there was more DNA of me in that sample, I would have amplified both kits and got a full 13 DNA marker profile. In this case, there was only enough to do the 9, and I had to use up the entire sample to even get that 9.
Okay, so you did the nine different locations, including the sex marker, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you got results over your threshold limit as to each of those markers, is that true?
That's true.
Okay. Well over 75 RFU on each sample, is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know how far over, but it was over 75.
Okay. And you compare that to the Y marker on the left grip of the gun, you got 75 when you did it twice, and you only got it in one time at 75. Is that correct?
That's right. With Profiler Plus, which is the one kit that gives the 9 markers, it was only that particular kit where the peak height or the RFU reached 75, and that's why it was called the Y.
Okay. Now, you've seen pictures of, and you were there when the gun was collected, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you saw that somebody was holding it with gloves, but they were, I guess there was some discussion going on about the collection of the gun, what was in it, and so forth?
Well, that particular job was left for the detectives. They wanted to note the gun, collect the gun, and they actually are the ones that transferred the gun eventually to the crime lab. I did not take that gun myself that particular night.
Okay, but they were holding it, and you saw pictures of them holding it and showing it to each other?
I saw a picture of Detective Katz holding the gun, examining the gun with a pair of latex gloves, yes.
Okay, and would there be any, I mean, is it possible that a little bit of his DNA when he was talking, maybe got on that gun?
Well, I would assume Detective Katz would be careful because they are trained on how to protect evidence, but in the realm of anything's possible, sure.
Yeah, he wasn't wearing a mask, for example?
No.
Okay.
Me and Beto came by, and perfect time to see this creepy bastard get a cameo.
In the luminol testing that you did, well, let me ask you this. Is there a professional organization that deals with blood spatter that you're familiar with?
I believe there is. I don't really follow them. I don't even know what they're called, but I think there still is an organization nationally, I'm not sure how big it is, that call themselves, Blood Spatter Association of America or something like that.
International Blood Spatter Association?
That could be it.
In other words, experts who really get into that belong to this organization, whatever it is?
Right.
Objection, my calls for speculation. You wouldn't know that.
He said he thinks he knows
Yeah,
it.
Beto.
We'll just leave it there. The
You're
objection's
familiar with it.
overruled.
There are professional
know.
organizations for people that are that deal with blood pattern and blood reconstruction work. Is that correct?
Well, I think what I was trying to say, I'm pretty sure there's at least one organization that deals with that subject matter.
Okay. And do you know whether or not they've done research in the area of luminol? That organization has conducted research in that field?
I'm not aware.
Okay. If I could have a minute.
Yes.
Just a minute.
This blood stain organization indicated in its research
Let me look at
that luminol is not
We're
good
getting there.
to pick up specks of blood.
15
Would you
minutes
disagree with
left.
that, Mr. Renteria?
Steve
It's a
Renteri.
hypothetical.
15
Assuming that
minutes.
there's a paper or a position paper, would you disagree with the proposition that luminol is not good for picking up specks of blood?
Yeah, I would disagree with that. I think luminol can pick up specks of blood.
Okay. And would you disagree that if that organization stated that in carpeting that in particular luminol is not good at picking up specks of blood, if that were the case?
Again,
I'm going to
that's
sustain the
inspects, not
objection
evidence.
because of the way you're asking the question. If you want to just ask him if he agrees or disagrees with a position, that's fine. As to who it comes from and assuming that they've said it, that brings in too much hearsay at this point. But you're certainly free to ask him whether he agrees or disagrees with the position.
Okay. I'll just let it go for
right.
the evidence, sure. Thank you. If I could just have a minute. I think I'm almost done here. As far as your work in blood stain or blood pattern, you're not a member of that organization or any similar organization, is that true?
That's true.
Okay, and do criminalists like yourself, do they have any type of certifying organization where a criminalist can be certified in particular areas of forensic science?
Yes.
Okay, and are you certified in any type of a blood stain or blood pattern field?
I don't know personally if there is any certification for that particular field. I know there's certification in general forensic science and also molecular biology as it relates to forensic science, and I am certified in those two.
Okay. Now, Mr. Renteria, I want to try to finish up here and talk a little bit about this frequency regarding the scrotum swab that was tested by yourself, and you developed a profile of basically two people's DNA, correct?
Correct.
And basically your opinion, and you don't have any question, that it appears to be a sample that has two people's DNA, correct?
Yes, that's what it's consistent with.
Okay, it's not consistent with one. In fact, you can positively, beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Welcome in here, young black economist, and thank you so much. I worked hard on that. I mean, that was fun. I hope I can do more of that. And if you're not a member here at Publicly Buzzed, you know, it would be it's a good idea to do it. You're getting a lot more content than just trials and true crime and Feral Friday, which is just its own thing in general. Yeah, with members and what I just put there in the chat, the Patreon. The Patreon is getting those days earlier, if not a week earlier sometimes. And then members who are here on YouTube are going to be getting, again, exclusive content. There's already a bunch on there. Just put out a 22 mini documentary about the Itman Company Store, which is an old mining company store. Anyone that knows any of the old history, especially in the West Virginia mountains, Kentucky mountains, but in this case, West Virginia. The miners basically lived in the same area that they worked, and they went to the company store. That's where they got paid. That's where they bought their goods. And the old saying goes that you could buy anything there but a car. Basically because they didn't want you to escape, right? Huh? It's a little fucked up. But yeah, if you member up if you want to see some cool stuff.
Say that it has to be more than one person, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And it theoretically could be 3, but it's more likely 2. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And one of the profiles is, and it was taken off of Mr. Spector's scrotum, so you would be shocked if it didn't contain his DNA. That would just be something out of the ordinary, correct?
That's right. We would expect his DNA to be on that sample.
Okay. And the foreign profile that did not belong to Mr. Spector, you know that certain genetic markers, because certain ones he didn't inherit, so they couldn't be from him, you know that they had to be from a second person. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you know from your other testing of that sample that it was not blood, because you did a Kasselmeyer test and it was negative. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. And you also looked at the, actually did the stain and did some cellular analysis, and you saw what you thought were epithelial cells. Is that correct?
I think I said they were possible epithelial cells because they didn't stain in the exact way we like to see to definitely say epithelial cells.
So leaning towards epithelial cells, let's say, would be possibly, that would be what they
possible epithelial cells.
And we know they have DNA in it.
Yes.
Okay. And we know that the DNA in epithelial cells, we know that, well, let me ask you this. And then you did an amylase test that was positive, correct?
Weak positive, yes.
Weak positive. Amylase saliva,
No.
epithelial cells. Okay, well, amylase, higher concentration in saliva, correct?
Correct.
Then you have a DNA profile that's from another person, and if you tested 94,000 people, you might find one other person who had a similar profile. Is that correct?
Again, I might find one other person that would also be included as a potential donor to the minor types of that sample.
And the rest would be excluded in that 94,000 number. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. But you don't consider that also in the testing that you've done, you find samples from the left breast of Lana Clarkson that had Mr. Spector's DNA. In other words, you've got two coincidences occurring at the same time, right? You don't add the numbers together, do you?
Excuse me, just a second.
I'm sorry. Objection, that's argumentative.
Sustain. Sustain.
Judge Diehard go hot now.
Let me ask you this question.
What?
With reference to the gun and the
What?
testing of the gun, what date did
What'd
you
he say?
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
actually do your testing of the gun, your DNA testing?
The sampling of the gun?
Sampling, DNA testing, you sampled it, you did your DNA test. When did you do that?
May I refer to my notes?
Sure, please do that.
The sampling of the gun, which again I did with Dr. Harold, occurred on May 29th, 2003.
So this, you were at the scene on February 3rd, correct?
Correct.
And then it was about well over 3 months, almost 4 months later that you sampled the gun?
Yes.
Okay. And had you already looked at the gun and then sent those white particles to some odontologist by the time that you did your sampling?
No. Once I observed the gun in the white material, I did notice there was blood on it. But again, as I previously testified, I had it photographed. And then the next day, it was delivered to Dr. Harold. She had it in her possession until I sampled it. I did not sample the white material to process and give to an odontologist.
Before you sampled it, that was months later, that was May 29th of 03. Had you been given any information that would help you in your evaluation of this case as to what that white material might have been?
Yes, through verbal conversations with Dr. Harold, at some point she had the opinion that that was possible dental material or from a tooth or teeth wedged into that serrated part of the front sight. But it was just verbal communication in the hallway and when we would talk about the case and other aspects.
Okay. And dental material that presumably was from Lana Clarkson, given the fact that she lost dental material during this event, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the import of that would be that the gun was inside her mouth when it was fired. That was your understanding, is that correct?
Well, I believe that's what Dr. Harold is using that as far as her conclusion of the reconstruction, but I can't speak for her. You'd have to ask her if she's using that as part of her opinion of what occurred.
Okay, but I'm really trying to understand that back in
late tonight,
May
baby.
29th of 03,
Understand, it's
you're concerned
where
with
it's a little late
testing the
tonight.
blood to see if it belonged to Lana Clarkson,
Start
basically.
wearing
Is
down
that
a
correct
bit.
genetically?
Yes, the blood stains were sampled to see if the blood was consistent with Lana Clarkson's sample or not.
Okay, but you already knew that it appeared that the gun was inside her mouth. In other words, there didn't seem to be a question about that this was the gun that caused her death and that it was inside her mouth. I mean, you already knew that.
Objection. This is
Did you know that, sir?
No.
All right.
Okay, you knew that there was dental material that she lost and that you knew that some of it was on the side of the gun, correct?
Well, I didn't know it personally. This is something that another expert has an opinion on, Dr. Harold, and she would be better to ask her if that was in fact dental material.
Didn't she tell you that before you did your sampling of the gun?
Yes.
Okay, so you knew that she knew, in other words, you relied upon her analysis that the gun was inside the mouth at the time it was fired.
I'm going to object if this is yours.
I'm not for the truth of the matter asserted. I think I see where counsel's going. So it's not being admitted for the truth, but to show his understanding and other matters that may have followed. You may proceed.
I mean, that's what you assumed when you did, before you did your sampling, correct?
Yeah, I know that was her feeling at the time. I don't know if she reached a final opinion, but her feeling at the time, given what she had evaluated, is she told me that the gun was most likely in her mouth when it went off.
And then you add to that some facts that you knew about. You had been to the crime scene or the death scene, depending on which side of the table you come from, and you'd seen tooth material that was collected by yourself and Mr. Connell, correct?
Correct. We saw
Okay.
possible tooth material at the scene, and the gun was in a position underneath her legs on the carpet.
Okay. And the tooth material being on the side of the gun would suggest to you, if that was really tooth material, that it was inside her mouth when it was fired. I mean, 2 and 2 seems to suggest that.
Yes.
Okay. So before you even did any sampling of the gun, basically, that was sort of the working premise that you had. Isn't that true?
Well, again, I don't know where you're trying to get with those questions. I cannot identify tooth material.
Okay.
But given what Dr. Harold said, it was her opinion at the time that the gun was most likely in Lana Clarkson's mouth, and that probably was dental material on the site and resulted in the breaking of her teeth, which we found possible dental material at the crime scene.
Okay. And when you tested the bullets the same time you tested the gun, is that correct?
Approximately, yes.
Okay. And you had the same information when you tested the bullets as you did when you tested the gun, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, had the gun been fingerprinted at all by the time that you swabbed it, or do you know?
I don't know.
Do you know whether it was held for fingerprints, or?
I believe it was processed for fingerprints, but I don't know the specific order of when it was actually processed.
Okay. When you sample an item, can you see the telltale signs of fingerprint processing?
Yeah, I think we went over this already, but on occasion you can tell if something was processed. However, there's sometimes you can't.
Okay. And did you ever sample the gun again, other than this one time on May 29th, 2003?
Yes.
Okay. When was that?
I believe it was maybe a few months after. I wanted to make sure to, because there was so much blood on the gun, I wanted to make sure that I would collect other samples for possible future analysis if anybody wanted to analyze any of the remaining blood that I did not do DNA typing on, both prosecution and the defense side.
Okay, so you collected additional blood from the weapon, but because you've already tested a number of areas, you didn't go ahead and do the actual testing. Is that correct?
That's right. It was about 2 weeks after, and I did it for the purposes of preserving that blood on swabs, frozen, in case somebody wanted to analyze it at a later date.
Okay, very good. Let me just check real quick.
About to finally tap out. It's getting close. 2 minutes. Everyone that's hung in there tonight, I appreciate it. Thank y'all so much.
I want to make sure that there's no
Real
question
G's in chat right now.
this one issue here, Mr. Renteria, then we'll wrap it up. On the scrotum swab that was taken from Mr. Spector, all of the genetic markers that were identified by you in your testing that did not correspond to Mr. Spector, in other words, all the types that were different than his, you found more than one. That's true, correct?
Yes.
All the ones that were different than Mr. Spector, each and every one of those was 100% consistent with Lana Clarkson. Is that true?
Yes.
Nothing further.
Thank you. Redirect.
I think I can finish this up
Go ahead.
quick. What is secondary transfer? What does that mean?
If you have, let's say, DNA from some other source than your own, and as an example, we could use a hand. So if I came over to Mr. Jackson and slapped him in the face maybe and got some of his saliva on my hand,
I forgive you for that. It's all right.
and touched this surface, I would have a secondary transfer of his DNA from his saliva on this surface. He didn't touch it, but I created that by doing a secondary transfer.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Recross.
Nothing further.
Thank you. First of all, based on your testimony, we're going to hose down the microphone.
Scrotum swabbing tonight, CH.
And thank you very much for being here. You're excused.
Judge
Ladies and gentlemen, keep in
Dowd,
mind the
my
admonition,
man,
9:30 tomorrow
my
morning.
guy, my dude.
Certainly.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The man. Where do we go from? Okay, where are we going? Janie Lintmuth, a senior criminalist at the LA County Department of Coroner, takes the stand an hour. She's going to start us off on Sunday. And hell yeah, everybody come through here tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank y'all so much. The next time you will see me and Dan will Dan Looney? Will Dan make it? Will Dan come through? Huh? 9 p.m. Eastern time. Not Dandy Savage. Dan the man. 9 p.m. Eastern time. Thursday night. Thanks, everyone. It's been an incredible experience with Phil so far. This Phil Spector trial is insane. And, yeah, we're going to keep trucking. Everyone, thank you all so much. I will see you Thursday. Have a great Wednesday. And I feel like I'm forgetting something. I don't think I am, though. I don't think I am. Thank you all so much. Yeah, Thursday. And then Feral Friday. I need to figure out... Did we figure out what I was doing Feral Friday? I think I have 2 movies in mind. No, wait. Is it really Friday the 13th? Friday the 13th is Friday. Yeah. Okay, cool. May have to watch a Friday the 13th film. I don't know. We'll see. And it's Halloween approaching. We'll see what the hell's up. I don't know. Have a great Wednesday. Love you guys. Let's fucking go. Boom.
Pittsburgh!